Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we examine a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is January 21st. On this day in 2023, the residents of Monterey Park, California, experienced a tragedy that sent shockwaves across the nation. What should have been a night of joy and celebration during Lunar New Year turned into a nightmare when a mass shooting at the Star Ballroom Dance Studio left 11 people dead and 9 others injured. It was a senseless act of violence that devastated a community that had gathered to celebrate joy and cultural tradition. Today, we're going to explore what happened that night and honor the lives that were lost. Let's get started. Monterey Park, California is a vibrant city east of Los Angeles. It's celebrated for its rich cultural heritage and its predominantly Asian American population. It's a place where traditions thrive, and the annual Lunar New Year festival stands as a shining example of the community's spirit. Known as one of the largest celebrations of its kind in Southern California, the festival brings together thousands for food, music, dancing, and the promise of a new beginning. On January 21st, 2023, the Lunar New Year celebrations were in full swing, filling the city with joy and energy. The Star Ballroom Dance Studio, a beloved space for older adults in the community, was no exception. That evening, it was filled with the sounds of music and laughter as people gathered to share in the festivities. For many, the ballroom was more than just a place to dance. It was a sanctuary. It was a second home where friendships blossomed and cultural traditions endured. But as the night unfolded, the peace and joy that filled the Star Ballroom were shattered in an instant, leaving the community forever changed. At 10:22 p.m., as celebrations were in full swing inside the Star Ballroom Dance Studio, a gunman entered the venue. Hu Can Tran, a 72-year-old man armed with a semi-automatic pistol equipped with an extended magazine, began shooting indiscriminately. Witnesses described the horrifying scene as Tran moved through the studio, targeting patrons without hesitation. In just a few minutes, the joyous atmosphere was replaced by devastation. By the time Tran fled the scene, 11 lives had been lost and 9 others were left injured. Survivors recalled the haunting silence after the gunfire that was punctuated by the cries of people searching for their loved ones. Most of the victims were regular attendees of the ballroom. They were older adults in their 60s and 70s who, up to that point, had found community and joy in the studio's welcoming space. Tran's actions that night didn't end there, though. After leaving the Star Ballroom, he drove a white cargo van to the Lai Ballroom in nearby Alhambra, intent on continuing his violent rampage. When Tan arrived at the Lai Ballroom, he encountered an unexpected barrier to his plans. Brandon Tsai, a 26-year-old employee at the venue, noticed Tran entering with his weapon. Without hesitation and with extraordinary courage, Tsai lunged at Tran and wrestled the gun away from him, preventing what could have been another devastating attack. Tsai later reflected on that life-altering moment, saying, quote, "I knew if I didn't act, everyone in the ballroom could have been killed. I just had to do something." End quote. Despite the danger, Tsai's quick actions prevented what could have been an even greater tragedy. Disarmed and thwarted, Tran fled the scene once again, this time without his weapon. Law enforcement officials credited Tsai with saving countless lives that night, and his bravery became a symbol of hope in what was just a dark, dark night. President Joe Biden later awarded Brandon Tsai the Medal of Courage, stating, quote, In an act of remarkable bravery, Brandon stopped a gunman and saved lives. His actions remind us all of the power of one person's courage to make a difference." End quote. Now, Tran was still at large, though, so a massive manhunt unfolded across Southern California. Investigators worked around the clock, piecing together details about the gunman's movements and his possible motives. Tran, who was known to frequent the Star Ballroom dance studio, was described to some as a reclusive figure who had become increasingly isolated in recent years. While no definitive motive for the attack was ever established, it was speculated that personal vendettas may have played a role in his actions. Less than 24 hours after the shooting, Tran's white cargo van was located in Torrance, about 30 miles away from Monterey Park. As police surrounded the vehicle, Tran took his own life inside the van, ending the immediate threat, but leaving behind a mountain of unanswered questions. Authorities found additional firearms and ammunition in the vehicle, suggesting that Tran may have been planning further violence. Although Tran's death ended the immediate threat, it left the community with lingering questions and a profound sense of loss. For the families of the victims and the residents of Monterey Park, the lack of clear answers about this senseless act only served to deepen their grief. The victims of the Monterey Park shooting were cherished members of their community, each with their own story and legacy. Among them was Mimi Nan, a 65-year-old woman who had danced at the Star Ballroom for years. Her family described her as a joyful presence who found happiness on a dance floor. In a statement, they wrote, quote, "She spent so many joyful nights at the Star Ballroom. It was her happy place. But on that night, her life was unfairly taken from her." End quote. Another victim, Valentino Alvaro, was described by his family as a loving father and grandfather who lived life to the fullest. His family wrote, quote, "He was a beacon of light in our lives, and his absence leaves a void we can never fill." End quote. Throughout Monterey Park, candlelight vigils honored those who are lost. The streets near the Star Ballroom became a sea of flowers, candles, and handwritten notes, as neighbors and strangers alike came together to share their grief and support for the victims' families. The Monterey Park tragedy underscored, yet again, the urgent need to address gun violence in the United States. In 2023 alone, the Gun Violence Archive reported over 600 mass shootings. Beyond the statistics, each act of violence takes away a real person with family and friends and hopes and dreams, and causes trauma that takes generations to heal. The Star Ballroom was a cherished space where people gather to celebrate, connect, and find joy. Its transformation into a site of violence was a painful blow to a community that had long prided itself on its unity and cultural richness. Despite the tragedy, the people of Monterey Park have shown extraordinary resilience. In the days following the shooting, neighbors, friends, and strangers all came together to support one another, raising funds for victims' families and sharing stories of hope and healing. Brandon Tsai's bravery that night remains a symbol of hope. His quick actions not only prevented further tragedy, but also reminded the world of courage that can arise in moments of crisis. His bravery not only saved lives, but inspired millions. In interviews, Tsai humbly reflected on his role, saying, quote, "I don't see myself as a hero. I just did what anyone should do to protect others." The Monterey Park shooting left an indelible mark on the community, but it also showed its resilience and its strength. While the immediate threat ended with the gunman's death, the grief, questions, and calls for change remain. The memory of those lost and the courage of those who acted in the face of danger serve as reminders of the power of community when it comes to overcoming tragedy. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Day by Day, true crime stories. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you're listening to it or watching it now. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Stay safe, and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!